Clara's hand slipped just enough for the marker to fall from her fingers and hit the floor. It bounced once and rolled toward the front row, but no one moved to pick it up. Every student in that classroom had their eyes locked on the board, on the correction Saintly had just made, and on Clara's face as the truth hit her harder than she expected. Her breath caught in her throat. Her chest tightened. Heat flushed across her cheeks. The problem she created, the one she designed to expose him, now stood rewritten in perfect order. Balanced, clean, fair. And it wasn't her handwriting on the board anymore. It was his. 9-year-old Saintly stepped back from the equation with calm confidence, not smugness. He didn't look proud or boastful. He simply looked sure of the math, sure of the logic, sure of himself. The classroom erupted around her. Yo, he fixed it? That kid is different. Kate, no way. Clara couldn't move. She couldn't even blink. The sound of the room grew louder, bouncing off her like she wasn't even standing there. She felt every pair of eyes shift from Saintly back to her, because the truth was now undeniable. He didn't just solve her test. He didn't just correct her. He exposed her, gently, respectfully, yet completely. Her stomach dipped, her palms warmed with embarrassment. She tried desperately to hide. Saintly turned around slowly, his small hands relaxed at his sides. His voice soft as he said, "Professor, it wasn't solvable the way you wrote it." A few students gasped again. Someone whispered, "She really tried him." Under their breath, Clara straightened her posture, but her throat felt tight. She had never been challenged like this, not by a colleague, not by a rival, and certainly not by a 9-year-old child who wasn't even tall enough to erase the top half of the board without stretching. Her thoughts scattered as she stared at Saintly. How did he see it so quickly? How did he remain so calm? And why, despite the sting of humiliation, did she feel a strange pull toward understanding him more? Her classroom had just changed forever. As the classroom buzzed with disbelief, Clara felt something far deeper than embarrassment settling inside her, a question, pressing and uncomfortable, rising from the center of her chest. She looked at Saintly, at the calm confidence in his posture, and for the first time that morning, the noise around her faded into something distant. Her mind shifted away from the board and onto the truth staring her in the face. How often do we misjudge people? Not because of their ability, but because of our assumptions. Have you ever underestimated someone because of what they looked like? Because of their age, their background? Because they didn't fit the image you expected? She took a slow breath, remembering the stunned expressions in the room. Have you ever been humbled in front of everyone? Not out of disrespect, but because the truth exposed what you didn't want to admit. Her eyes drifted to Saintly again, watching him return to his seat with quiet confidence, his small backpack resting against the chair like it belonged in a university classroom. And have you ever witnessed a child, do something adults couldn't. Something so unexpected, so sharp, so true, that it forced you to confront your own insecurities? The room had already made up its mind about Saintly. They admired him. They celebrated him. They whispered about him like he was a rare moment they were lucky to witness. But Clara's realization cut deeper than any student chatter could. She hadn't just underestimated him. She had underestimated herself, her strength, her fears, her readiness to teach someone so extraordinary. The question now lingered in the air, heavy and unavoidable. If a 9-year-old could see what she missed, what else was she blind to? Clara stood at the front of the room, but for the first time in her career, she felt smaller than every student sitting before her. As Saintly settled back into his seat, the truth pressed against her ribs with a weight she could no longer ignore. This wasn't just about a wrong equation. It wasn't even about Saintly's genius. It was about her. Her own insecurities were louder than the classroom noise. Every doubt she had tried to bury inside herself suddenly rose to the surface. She had spent years fighting for respect from her colleagues, her department, even from students who looked at her youth and assumed she didn't belong. She had poured everything into proving she deserved her position. Yet somehow it never felt like enough. And today, with one quiet correction, a 9-year-old had exposed the fear she hadn't admitted out loud. She was terrified of being overshadowed, terrified that her hard work could be dismissed, terrified that her department would finally say what she had always feared. She isn't ready. She isn't experienced enough. She doesn't command a room. So she tested Saintly, not out of curiosity, not out of academic challenge, but out of self-protection. She wanted to assure herself she still held control. She wanted to believe she was still the authority in her own classroom. But when Saintly rewrote the problem with ease, something inside her cracked. Her confidence, her pride, her belief that she needed to be the smartest person in the room to earn respect. The truth hit her even harder. She had attempted to diminish a child out of fear, and that realization stung far more than any student whisper. Clara looked around the room, breathing slowly, deliberately. This moment wasn't just a lesson for her students. It was a lesson meant for her, a lesson that would unravel everything she thought she understood about teaching, humility, and the kind of strength that comes from admitting your flaws. And the consequences of this moment were only just beginning. The classroom noise finally settled, but Clara couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was only the beginning. Saintly had corrected her equation, yes, but there was something else behind the way he spoke, something in the softness of his tone that lingered in her mind. A child that brilliant didn't grow alone. Someone had shaped him. Someone had poured into him. Someone had taught him confidence without arrogance. And Clara sensed, without knowing why, that meeting that person would change everything. As Saintly packed his backpack, she noticed a quiet determination in the way he moved. He wasn't flustered. He wasn't overwhelmed. He handled the entire situation with the grace of someone raised to stand strong, no matter who questioned him. Clara exhaled slowly. She had challenged him out of fear, but the real test was waiting for her outside that classroom. Because Saintly wasn't alone. He had a mother, one Clara had not yet met. An instinct told her this woman would not take lightly what happened here today. A shift stirred inside Clara. Equal parts anxiety and curiosity. What kind of woman raises a child like this? What kind of strength does she carry? What will she when she learns the truth? Clara didn't know it yet, but the next interaction would shake her far more than any classroom moment ever had. This story wasn't just about a wrong equation. It was about three people whose lives were about to collide in a way none of them expected. What happens next changed all three of their lives. And it started with one mistake on a chalkboard. Family, before we continue, please like this video and comment below. It truly helps YouTube push this story out to more people, and it keeps this channel growing. Your support means everything. Welcome to Mr. Michael Stories, where America's greatest stories and life lessons meet creativity and heart. If you're new to the family, we're grateful to have you here. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It helps us bring more unforgettable stories your way. Colorado mornings had a way of pretending life was simple, even when the people walking across campus carried storms inside them. The sunlight stretched itself across the University of Colorado courtyard, falling over quiet lawns, polished walkways, and students drifting toward their classes with wide yawns and half-zipped jackets. From a distance, it all looked peaceful. But inside room 214, peace was the last thing on Clara's mind. She stood behind her desk long before the first student arrived, tapping a marker against her palm, like someone trying to steady their nerves without admitting it. Her shoulders were tense, her expression tight, and her thoughts ran in circles she couldn't escape. 29 years old, with a PhD on the wall and a reputation still dangling in the air like it belonged to someone older, Clara felt the pressure of everyone's expectations pressing against her ribs. Her colleagues treated her like she stumbled into her job instead of earning it. Students sometimes looked at her like she was too young to know what she was talking about. And the department? They hid judgment behind polite smiles. New blood, they called her. Promising, they added, always with the tone that suggested promising wasn't the same as respected. Every morning, Clara walked into her classroom, wondering if today would be the day someone questioned her authority again. So this morning, she decided to take control early. She set her bag down, uncapped her marker, and told herself she would lead this class with confidence. Real confidence, not the kind held together by thin nerves and caffeine. Students trickled in slowly, filling the seats with chatter and laughter. Clara inhaled and exhaled with the discipline of someone trying not to show how tightly she was wound. Then the door opened, and the room shifted. Saintly walked in, small, calm, and observant. His backpack looked almost too big for his shoulders, but he carried it like it weighed nothing. He didn't rush. He didn't shrink back. He simply walked, with a natural steadiness that drew eyes without him trying. A 9-year-old genius in a college class should have felt out of place, but somehow he didn't. That alone bothered Clara, not because she disliked him, but because she didn't understand him yet, and not understanding made her nervous. Saintly scanned the room like someone quietly measuring the air, then found a spot near the front. He sat with perfect posture, hands folded on the desk, looking ready to learn in a way most college students didn't. Clara cleared her throat. "Good morning, everyone," she began, steadying her voice. The class settled, but her focus drifted to the boy in the second row. His calm expression, his quiet confidence, the ease in his gaze. The department had praised him endlessly. "Brilliant," they said. "A prodigy," they whispered about funding, early programs, potential publications. All for a 9-year-old child who had barely lived long enough to understand half the world he could already calculate. Clara felt a tug in her chest. Not anger, not resentment. Something heavier, something she didn't want to name. If he was really as gifted as they claimed, where did that leave her? Her fingers tightened around the marker. She turned toward the board and wrote an equation. Not an ordinary equation, not a challenging one. Trap! Numbers and symbols collided in a formation that broke more rules than it followed. A line of math that made no logical sense. Intentionally so. Test! Her test. "Let's begin with something warm up," she said, trying to keep her tone even. Students stared at the board like she'd written ancient code. Confused murmurs slipped through the room. Clara stepped aside slowly, heart picking up pace. "Saintly," she said, keeping her voice steady, but everyone heard the underlying challenge. "Why don't you give this a try?" Eyes swung toward the boy. Saintly blinked once, then again, not in fear, just assessing, calmly studying the chaos. Clara wrote, like someone reading a map with landmarks missing. He stood quietly, pushed his chair back, and began walking toward the board with the quiet composure of someone 3 times his age. Clara watched him approach. Her decision was made. The test had begun. Saintly reached the front of the classroom with a calmness that didn't belong to someone his age. His steps were light, almost silent, but each one carried a confidence that made the room go still. Even the students who came in half asleep now leaned forward, sensing a moment worth paying attention to. Clara clasped her hands together behind her back, though her pulse continued its uneven rhythm. This was the point of the test, to see how he handled something deliberately wrong. But as she watched him stand before the board, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was the one being examined. Saintly tilted his head slightly as he looked at the equation. His eyes moved slowly across the symbols, studying each piece like he was checking a puzzle for missing corners. He didn't frown, didn't squint, didn't show even a flicker of confusion. He simply observed. Then he turned to face Clara with a small, respectful nod. "Professor," he said quietly, "this isn't solvable. The words weren't loud, but they sliced through the silence with enough precision to freeze the room. A couple of students exchanged looks. Someone exhaled sharply, as if trying not to laugh. Another whispered, "Here we go." Clara felt a pinch in her stomach, but she forced her expression to remain neutral. "What do you mean by that?" she asked, her voice tighter than she intended. Saintly pointed to middle of the equation. "Here," he said, tapping the section gently. "These variables don't belong beside each other the way they're written. They cancel the logic of the rest of the line." He moved his finger to another symbol, and this operation comes out of order. If you solve from left to right, it breaks the rule you set up here. Murmurs rippled through the room like a wave. Saintly continued, still gentle, still respectful. It kind of works against itself, like trying to walk forward and backward at the same time. A few students burst out laughing at the comparison. "That's facts," someone muttered. Clara felt heat creep up her neck. She knew the explanation was true. She had written the equation specifically to be impossible, but hearing it described so clearly by a 9-year-old struck something deep inside. Wasn't his words that stung. It was how effortlessly he understood. Saintly turned back to the board. "May I fix it?" he asked. Clara didn't trust her voice enough to respond immediately. She nodded instead. Saintly picked up the eraser and wiped the board with smooth, careful strokes. He didn't rush, didn't smudge symbols, didn't leave stray marks. It was like he respected the board itself, treating each sweep as part of a process rather than a task. Then he lifted the marker. Every student leaned in. Even Clara found herself holding her breath without realizing it. Saintly began rewriting the equation. Clean lines, steady handwriting, no hesitation. He adjusted one symbol, shifted another, reorganized the structure with the quiet certainty of someone who saw math not as a challenge, but as a language he spoke fluently. Every element supported the next. The room grew so quiet that even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. When he stepped back, the equation looked completely different. Balanced, clear, elegant in a way Clara hadn't expected. It was the kind of problem she would have been proud to place on a midterm. "There," he said softly. "Now it works." The class reacted instantly. "Yo, what?" "He fixed the whole thing." "Nah, that's crazy." A student in the back shook his head with a grin. "Man, that kid is something else." Clara couldn't speak. Her heartbeat thudded in her chest, each beat a reminder that she had walked into this room trying to take control, only to watch a child restore order she had intentionally disrupted. Saintly didn't bask in the admiration. He simply placed the marker back on the ledge, brushed his hands together lightly, and returned to his seat. No bragging, no showmanship, just quiet assurance. As he sat down, their eyes met again. There was no challenge in his gaze, no pride, only sincerity. It wasn't meant to work the other way. he said quietly, almost as if reassuring her. "I just fixed it." Clara swallowed hard. She had expected confusion. She had expected hesitation. She had expected a mistake she could guide him through. She hadn't expected this. The classroom slowly settled, though the whispers continued like faint echoes. Clara forced herself to refocus on the lesson, but her mind refused to move forward. She had created a test. He had revealed her fear, and now she had to decide what to do with the truth she had been avoiding. Class ended, but no one moved right away. Students lingered in their seats, whispering about what they'd just witnessed. Some replayed Saintly's explanation to each other, tracing invisible equations in the air. Others kept glancing at Clara, unsure of how she felt after being corrected so gently, yet so publicly. Clara stood near her desk, pretending to straighten papers she hadn't touched. Her stomach felt tight, not from humiliation, but from an awakening she hadn't expected to face today. She kept replaying Saintly's voice in her head. Not mocking, not arrogant, but steady and sincere. It wasn't meant to work the other way. I just fixed it. Simple, honest, unbothered. As the last students began to file out, Saintly slipped his small backpack over his shoulders and walked toward the door. Clara hesitated, then stepped forward. "Saintly?" He turned immediately, his expression open and patient, as though he already knew she wasn't calling to scold him. "Yes, Professor?" Clara inhaled slowly. Her words felt heavy, but necessary. "I owe you an apology." Saintly blinked once, then tilted his head slightly. "For what?" "For what I wrote on the board," she said. "For testing you the way I did, and for assuming the wrong things about you before I even gave you a chance." Saintly didn't rush to respond. He took a moment, thinking with a seriousness that didn't match his age. Then he gave a small shrug. "It's okay," he said gently. "My grandma says you don't judge people by their first mistake, just by whether they keep making it." Clara felt the words settle deep inside her. Such grace from someone so young forced her to breathe differently. "And I won't make that mistake again," she said quietly. Saintly nodded, accepting her promise, as easily as he had corrected her equation. He adjusted the strap of his backpack and added, "My mom usually says grown-ups get nervous when they see someone who learns fast. She tells me not take it personal." Clara felt her throat tighten. He wasn't repeating her fears. He was naming them. "I'd like to talk to her," Clara said carefully, "to explain what happened today. She deserves to hear it." Saintly didn't look surprised. "She's outside." Clara paused. "Outside?" He nodded. "She waits for me every day. She likes making sure I get where I'm going." For a moment, Clara imagined the woman he described, a mother who protected her child not out of strictness, but out of love, a woman with presence, judgment, and strength, the kind of mother who would not let something like today go unaddressed. Clara exhaled, feeling her heartbeat rise again. "Is she expecting me?" she asked. "No," Saintly replied simply, "but she'll talk to you. She always talks when someone is trying." There was no accusation in his tone, no hesitation, just certainty. As they walked toward the door together, the hallway felt strangely quiet. Students passed by, but Clara only heard the soft rhythm of Saintly's footsteps beside her. She wondered what his mother was like up close. She wondered what she would say. She wondered if she would see right through her the way Saintly had. The building doors opened to the bright Colorado afternoon sunlight, pouring through with an intensity that made Clara blink. She followed Saintly down the steps, her pulse quickening with each stride. Then she saw her, standing near the walkway, arms lightly crossed, gaze scanning the campus with a protective awareness. Saintly's mother. Even before she spoke, Clara felt something shift, a mix of nerves, respect, and a pull she couldn't explain. The woman's presence was calm but commanding, grounded in a strength that didn't need to announce itself. Saintly ran ahead, waving. "Ma!" His mother's features softened the moment she saw him, but her eyes sharpened again when they landed on Clara. Clara steadied herself. This wasn't just a conversation. This was the beginning of something far bigger than she knew how to prepare for. Saintly trotted back to her side and whispered, "She's nice, but she sees everything." Clara forced a breath. "I figured." As they approached the woman, Clara felt every moment of today, the mistake, the correction, the awakening, collect behind her like weight she could no longer hide. She wasn't just here to explain a wrong equation. She was here to confront the part of herself that wrote it, and she had no idea what this meeting would uncover. Family, if this story is speaking to you so far, subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories filled with heart, meaning, and unforgettable moments. The late afternoon sun washed over the steps of the University of Colorado building, turning the concrete a soft, warm shade as Clara followed Saintly outside. Her pulse quickened with each step. She wasn't afraid of confrontation, but she was afraid of disappointing someone she had never met, someone whose presence she already sensed would matter. Saintly walked ahead with his usual calm stride, his backpack bouncing lightly against his shoulders. He didn't look worried or tense. He looked like a boy who trusted the world to meet him kindly. Clara wondered what it felt like to grow up with that kind of security. They reached the bottom of the stairs, and there she was, Saintly's mother. She stood with one hand resting gently against her hip, her posture effortless, yet commanding. Her stance was steady, feet planted, shoulders relaxed but alert. Her eyes swept the area, as though she carried both vigilance and peace in equal measure. She was dressed simply, but the simplicity only made her confidence more striking. Her presence wasn't loud. It was centered, firm, rooted. When Saintly ran toward her, her expression softened instantly. A small smile touched her lips, warm, protective, and proud all at once. But when she lifted her gaze to Clara, the warmth faded into something measured. Not hostile, not unfriendly, just cautious, waiting to understand the situation before offering trust. Saintly stood between them, looking back and forth with a knowing little grin. "Ma," he announced with a casual boldness only a child could manage, "I fixed her math." Clara's breath caught. Saintly's mother arched her brow slowly. "You fixed her math?" Clara stepped forward quickly, shaking her head. "It's not exactly what it sounds like. Well, it is what it sounds like, but not in the way you might think." Saintly's mother didn't interrupt. She simply watched, her eyes steady, unreadable but not cold. Clara swallowed hard. "I owe you an explanation. Today in class, I wrote an equation that wasn't solvable. I used it to test Saintly's ability, and that wasn't fair to him." Saintly's mother shifted her weight slightly, arms folding loosely across her chest. The movement wasn't defensive. It was evaluative, a gesture of a woman who had listened to many people in her life and could tell instantly when someone wasn't being honest. "So you set him up?" she asked, quietly. Clara winced. "I tested him because I let my own insecurities get in the way. It wasn't right." Saintly's mother didn't speak for several long seconds. She watched Clara with a focus that made Clara feel as though every thought was visible on her face. When she finally responded, her tone was cool, steady. "The equation wasn't the problem," she said. "Everybody makes mistakes." Clara nodded, waiting. "The problem," she continued, "is why you wrote it the way you did." Saintly looked up at his mother, then at Clara, sensing the gravity of the moment. Clara took a small step forward, bracing herself. "You're right. I didn't believe in him the way I should have. I let my fear of being underestimated cloud my judgment." Saintly's mother exhaled slowly, the edge in her posture softening just slightly. "Thank you for telling the truth." Clara felt the weight in her chest lighten, not completely, but enough to breathe a little easier. Yet the tension between them didn't disappear. It simply shifted into a space of respect. Respectful caution, respectful curiosity. Clara sensed that this woman wasn't quick to anger, but she wasn't quick to trust either. Saintly tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Ma, she's trying." The woman looked down at him, then back at Clara, studying her again. "We'll see," she murmured. But even in those two words, Clara heard something unexpected. An opening. Not approval, not forgiveness, but a chance. A chance to show she wasn't the same person who wrote that wrong equation. A chance to learn. A chance to understand the boy standing between them. And a chance to understand the woman who raised him. For a moment, the air around them seemed to thicken with quiet expectation. Students passed by in clusters, heading toward their next classes, but Clara barely noticed any of them. Her entire focus rested on the woman standing before her, the mother of the child she had underestimated so badly. Saintly's mother didn't move, didn't shift, didn't soften beyond the slight release in her shoulders. She watched Clara with the attention of someone who had learned, through experience, not to take any adult's apology at face value. Her eyes held a steadiness that made Clara feel like she was being evaluated on a level deeper than anything academic. "Explain something to me," the woman said calmly. "Why did you really write that problem the way you did?" Clara inhaled. She didn't want to offer excuses. That would only insult them both. "I was afraid," she admitted, quietly. "Not of Saintly, but of what his brilliance made me confront in myself. I've been struggling to feel respected in my department. Everyone around me thinks my age means I'm not ready. When Saintly walked into my classroom, I took out my own insecurity on him. He didn't deserve that." Saintly's mother held her gaze for a long, unbroken moment. Clara felt exposed, stripped down to her intentions, with no room to hide behind academic language or professional distance. "You know," Saintly's mother finally said, "most people would have blamed the boy, or brushed it off, or pretended it was part of the lesson." "I know," Clara replied, "and that's why I wanted to tell the truth." The woman nodded once. Not acceptance, but acknowledgement. Behind them, Saintly shifted his backpack and stepped closer to his mother. "Ma?" he said softly. "She's sorry for real." The woman looked down at him, her expression gentling the way sunlight softens water. "I hear her," she said. Then her attention returned to Clara. "Respect means something to me," she continued, "especially when it comes to my child. He's young, but he's aware. He feels when someone doubts him, even they don't say it out loud." Clara's chest tightened. "I won't doubt him again." The woman's stare sharpened just slightly. Not cruel, but testing the strength behind Clara's promise. "Words are easy," she replied. "Behavior is what shows truth." Clara nodded. "You're right." They stood in silence for a few seconds. The breeze shifted, rustling the trees nearby, carrying the murmur of distant conversations across the courtyard. Saintly swayed a little on his feet, watching both adults as though this meeting was an important equation he needed to solve. Piece by piece, the mother slowly unfolded her arms. "So tell me," she said, "what do you want from this conversation?" Clara took a small breath. "I want to make things right. I want you to know that I see your son's value, and I'm committed to supporting him the way a teacher should." The woman studied her again, expression thoughtful. There was no hostility in her eyes now, only analysis, as though she was weighing Clara's sincerity on a scale only she understood. Saintly spoke up again, his voice gentle. "Ma, she wants to learn." The woman's lips twitched into the faintest hint of a smile. Not big, not bright, but something real. "I can tell she's trying," she agreed softly. "But trying is the first step, not the last." Clara nodded again. "I know." "Good," the woman replied, "because if you're going to work with Saintly, You need more than sympathy or guilt. You need understanding." "I want to understand," Clara said immediately. This time, the mother took a slow step toward her. Not aggressive, intentional. "Understanding takes time," she said, "and honesty, and being willing to see things you might not be comfortable seeing." Clara met her gaze steadily. "I'm willing." Another long pause, another silent reading of Clara's posture, tone, and eyes. Finally, Saintly's mother exhaled through her nose and nodded. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow afternoon. Come by. We'll talk." Clara blinked. "You're inviting me." "I'm inviting you to listen," the woman corrected. "There's a difference." Saintly grinned, clearly pleased. "Ma doesn't invite just anybody." The woman looked at her son with amused exasperation. "Boy, hush." Clara couldn't help a small smile. The tension didn't disappear, but it shifted into something more structured. A boundary, yes, but also a bridge. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "We'll see," the woman replied, but her tone had softened. Clara understood the message behind the words. This was not forgiveness. This was not acceptance. This was an opening, and what she did with it would determine what came next. Clara didn't know what she expected to feel after Saintly's mother invited her to visit, but as she stood there on the courtyard walkway, watching mother and son prepare to leave, she realized the feeling wasn't relief. It was something deeper, something weightier, and something she couldn't quite name. Saintly tugged gently at his mother's sleeve. "Ma, can she walk with us to the parking lot?" The woman glanced at Clara, considering. "If she wants to." Clara nodded immediately. "I'd like to." They began walking side by side, Saintly moving ahead in small bursts of excitement, skipping every few steps as though the world itself was a puzzle he couldn't wait to solve. For a while, none of the adults spoke. Clara used the silence to study the way Saintly's mother carried herself. There was a groundedness in her stride, an awareness in her posture that made her seem taller than she was. She walked like someone who had learned to stand in two worlds at once, one that demanded she protect her child fiercely, and another that required warmth, patience, and the knowledge of when to offer grace. Finally, Saintly's mother broke the silence. "You know," she said softly, "being a teacher of gifted children takes more than knowing the subject. It takes knowing the child." Clara turned toward her. "I want to understand him better. I know I made a mistake today, and I want to approach tomorrow differently." "Good," the woman replied, "because understanding Saintly means understanding where he comes from, not just his home, not just his grades, but the world that shaped him." Clara listened closely. The woman continued, "In our community, we don't raise our children to shrink. We teach them to stand tall, even when people expect less from them. We teach them to speak clearly, to think deeply, to move with purpose, because the world doesn't always give our children the benefit of the doubt." Clara swallowed gently, absorbing every word. The woman went on, not with anger, but with truth. So when someone doubts him, even in small ways, even unintentionally, he feels it. Kids like mine learn early when someone is underestimating them. Clara looked ahead at Saintly, watching him hop over a painted line on the sidewalk, like it was part of a game he invented on the spot. I didn't mean to make him feel small. I know you didn't mean it, the woman said, but meaning and impact aren't the same thing. Clara's chest tightened. You're right. You're learning, the woman replied gently, and that matters. They reached a row of parked cars. Saintly pressed his palms against the side of their vehicle and leaned back, swinging his legs slightly as he waited for the adults to finish talking. Clara smiled faintly at the small boy's patience. Saintly's mother joined him at the door, but she wasn't finished speaking. She turned back to Clara with a look of quiet strength. Let me tell you something else, she said. Our children carry expectations most people never see. Expectations to excel, to represent, to push past barriers they didn't build. It's a lot for someone who's only 9, but it's the reality. Clara nodded slowly. I want to support him in that. Truly, I believe you do, she said. But supporting him means listening. It means learning. It means seeing him the way we see him, not as a miracle, not as a project, but as a child with a gift and a future that must be protected. I understand, Clara whispered. The woman gave a slow nod, acknowledging her sincerity, without fully lowering her guard. You'll learn more tomorrow, she added. It'll make sense when you visit. You'll see how he lives, how he learns, how our world shapes him. Clara's pulse fluttered with nerves. I'll be there. Saintly brightened. You'll like our place. Ma cooks good food, and she talks to herself when she thinks the woman shot him a playful look. Boy, don't tell all my business. Clara breathed out a small laugh, grateful for the moment of lightness. It softened the gravity of everything that had been said, but didn't erase its importance. As the woman opened the car door for Saintly, she stepped aside and faced Clara one last time. Tomorrow, she said with calm finality, come with an open mind. I will, Clara promised. And come ready to see things you don't see in your classroom. Clara's heart thudded once, heavy and sure. I'm ready. The woman nodded, and in that nod, something shifted between them. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but understanding. The beginning of a bridge being built one plank at a time. As the car pulled away, Clara stood alone on the walkway, the Colorado air cool against her skin. The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow across the campus. But Clara didn't notice the light. All she felt was the weight of tomorrow, a visit that would open her eyes to more than she expected. More about Saintly, more about his world, more about herself. Clara had rehearsed the walk from her car to the apartment entrance at least 5 times in her mind, but nothing prepared her for the moment she actually stepped out onto the sidewalk. The air felt cooler here, carrying the faint aroma of seasoned food drifting from one of the upper windows. A soft hum of music traveled down the hallway from somewhere inside the building. Warm, rhythmic, full of life. It was a sound she didn't hear in the polished, quiet halls of the university. As she approached the courtyard of the apartment complex, she saw children jumping rope in a perfectly timed double pattern, their voices rising in practiced rhythm. A group of teenagers laughed near a stairwell, their conversation animated and effortless. The whole scene had an energy that was lived in, familiar, and layered with culture in a way Clara had rarely experienced. Her stomach fluttered. She told herself it was curiosity. But she knew nerves played a part too. She wasn't walking into a classroom. She was walking into someone's world. She reached the building entrance and checked the apartment number again, making sure she hadn't misread it. She smoothed her blouse, took a steadying breath, and knocked twice. The door flew open almost immediately. Saintly stood there grinning, his eyes bright with the excitement of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. "You came," he said, stepping aside eagerly. His enthusiasm eased something tight inside Clara's chest. She smiled, more relaxed than she expected. "Of course I came. I told you I would." "Ma's in the kitchen," he announced proudly. "She's thinking today. That means the food is good." Clara blinked. "Thinking?" Saintly nodded, matter-of-factly. "Yeah? When she's thinking, she talks to herself and makes everything taste better." Before Clara could respond, the scent from inside reached her, something rich, seasoned, and comforting in a way that wrapped around her senses instantly. She stepped in, closing the door gently behind her. The apartment was small, but inviting. Warm colors filled the living room. Deep reds, earthy browns, soft golds. Family photos lined the walls, grandparents smiling from old portraits, cousins laughing at gatherings, snapshots of Saintly at different ages. Every picture felt intentional, a record of love and heritage. A quilt draped over the back of the couch, handmade and detailed with care. The coffee table held books, not decorative ones, but books clearly lived with. Some were about mathematics, others were about history, community, and self-growth. Clara realized quickly that this wasn't just a home. It was an upbringing. Saintly motioned toward the living room. "You can sit here if you want, or go see Ma. She likes when people greet her properly." Clara let out a small breath. "I'll go greet her." As she followed him toward the kitchen, the music became clearer, soft, soulful, carried by a voice singing low in the background. It mixed with the aroma of vegetables sautéing and something slow cooking on the stove. When Clara stepped into the kitchen doorway, Saintly's mother was standing with her back to them, stirring a pot with easy, practiced movements. Her posture held the same grounded strength, Clara noticed. The day before, but here, in her own space, that strength felt even more pronounced, natural, effortless. "Ma," Saintly said, tapping the doorway lightly. "She's here." The woman turned slowly. Her gaze landed on Clara, steady, observant, neither cold nor overly welcoming, just present. "Hello," Clara said softly. Thank you for letting me come. Saintly's mother didn't respond right away. She wiped her hands on a towel, then nodded once. Not dismissive, deliberate. You're welcome, she finally said. Come in. Clara stepped fully into the kitchen, feeling the shift in atmosphere. This wasn't the university. This wasn't neutral ground. This was a space shaped by history, family, and pride. A space Clara knew she had to treat with respect. Saintly climbed onto a chair at the table, swinging his legs as he watched both of them closely, eager for what would happen next. Clara inhaled the aroma again, letting it settle her nerves. This was the beginning of the real conversation, the one she hadn't yet found the courage to imagine. And as she took a seat at the table, she realized she was stepping into a world far richer and more layered than she had ever known. Clara sat at the small kitchen table with her hands loosely folded, trying not to appear as nervous as she felt. The room was warm, filled with the aroma of simmering spices, and the soft music continued in the background like a familiar heartbeat. Everything about this kitchen reflected the woman who stood in it, steady, intentional, and full of layers Clara had yet to understand. Saintly's mother lifted the lid from a pot, releasing another rush of comforting fragrance. She tasted a bit of the broth with the edge of a spoon, nodded to herself, and whispered something under her breath that Clara couldn't catch. Saintly had been right. She talked to herself when she was thinking. "Smells amazing," Clara said softly. Saintly's mother didn't look up immediately. She wiped her spoon clean, set it aside, and said, "It's just dinner." Saintly grinned. "Ma's food is never just dinner. Makes people tell the truth." Clara blinked. "Tell the truth?" "Oh, yeah," Saintly said confidently. "Every time she cooks something good, people start saying things they've been holding in." His mother gave him a look that carried equal parts affection and warning. "Saintly, stop telling all my business." "But it's true," he insisted. Clara couldn't help a small laugh, though she quickly swallowed it when the woman's attention shifted to her. "Sit," she instructed calmly, motioning toward one of the plates. "I made enough." Clara nodded. "Thank you." Saintly rushed to sit beside her. His mother served each of them with practiced grace, a scoop of seasoned vegetables, tender chicken, rice that smelled like it had been prepared with love rather than instructions. When Clara took her first bite, she paused. The flavor was warm, comforting, layered with spices she couldn't name. "This incredible," she said. The woman's lips curved into the smallest hint of satisfaction. "I'm glad you like it." They ate in silence for a few moments, Saintly humming to himself between bites. Then, unexpectedly, Clara felt her throat tighten with a need to speak, a need she didn't plan for, didn't rehearse. The food really was truth serum. "I didn't test him because he's young," she said suddenly, before she could stop herself. "I tested him because I was afraid he might be better than me." Saintly's spoon paused mid-air. His mother didn't blink. Clara stared at her plate, feeling the weight of her admission settle heavily between them. "I've been struggling in my department. People doubt me because of my age. I've been trying so hard to prove myself that when Saintly walked in, I panicked. I didn't want to be shown up." The woman leaned back in her chair, folding her arms loosely. There was no anger in her eyes, no judgment, just an unwavering directness that made Clara feel seen in a way that was uncomfortable but necessary. "Why didn't you say that yesterday?" she asked. "Because yesterday I wasn't sure I deserved to," Clara whispered. "But today, your son deserves honesty." Saintly's mother nodded slowly. "Good. Because honesty is the only way you'll learn anything meaningful." Saintly reached over and nudged Clara's arm gently. "See, I told you the food works." His mother exhaled sharply. A laugh with its edges softened. "Boy, hush." Clara felt something unsteady in her chest, a mixture of embarrassment, relief, and the dawning awareness that this conversation was not just about teaching. It was about character. "You know," the woman said, her gaze steady on Clara, "in our home, we don't pretend. If we're hurt, we say it. If we're afraid, we work through it. If we're proud, we show it." That's how Saintly grew into who he is. Because he sees truth every day. Clara nodded slowly. "I want to learn from that." "Do you?" the woman asked, tilting her head slightly. Her tone wasn't accusatory. It was inquisitive, probing for depth. "Yes," Clara answered without hesitation. "I want to teach him well. And to do that, I need to understand him and the world he comes from." The woman's expression softened in a way that was subtle but unmistakable. A quiet shift, a loosening. "That's a good start," she replied. Saintly nudged her again. "Ma, she's trying." "I know," the woman said. They continued eating, but the atmosphere had changed. The tension that once sat between them had melted into something gentler, still cautious, still guarded, but warm at the edges. Clara felt it too, a connection forming, fragile but real. When they finished, Saintly's mother collected the plates with thoughtful precision. Clara watched her move around the kitchen, every gesture confident and efficient. "Thank you," Clara said again, more sincerely than before. "You're welcome," the woman replied. "But remember, this conversation isn't finished." Clara nodded. "I didn't expect it to be." "Good," the woman said, "because there's more you need to understand before you call yourself his teacher." Clara felt a flutter in her chest. Not fear, but anticipation. She wanted to hear more. She wanted to understand this woman's world, and she wanted to earn her respect. The kitchen felt different now. Not because the food was gone or because the room had quieted, but because something unspoken had settled among the three of them. Something honest, delicate, and strangely comforting. Clara sat with her hands loosely clasped, watching Saintly's mother move around the sink. Every gesture she made carried intention. every movement shaped by purpose and lived experience. Saintly leaned back in his chair, swinging his legs lightly as if nothing remarkable had happened, though Clara felt like something inside her had shifted. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself in the warmth of the space, the hum of soft music still floating from the living room, and the mellow rhythm of water running into the sink. When Saintly's mother finally turned around, she dried her hands with a towel and placed it neatly on the counter. Her gaze moved to Clara again. Steady, thoughtful, weighing sincerity the way one weighs truth. "You know," she began, "genius isn't just about numbers or solving problems. A child like Saintly needs people who see him for all he is, not just what he can do." Clara nodded. "I want to understand him on every level, not just academically." "Then you need to understand the world that shaped him," the woman replied, stepping forward slightly. "Because he didn't learn confidence from books. He learned it from the people around him, from his roots, from hearing stories about strength, courage, and knowing your place, even when others try to ignore it." Clara listened closely, allowing the weight of every word to settle. "He's brilliant," the woman continued, "but he's also a child who pays attention to everything: tone, intention, silence. When someone believes in him, he knows, and when they don't, he knows that too." Clara lowered her gaze briefly. "I didn't believe in him at first, but I do now. Completely." A small pause. When she lifted her eyes again, the woman was studying her, not harshly, not with suspicion, but with a depth that made Clara sit a little straighter. It was as though Saintly's mother was trying to read beyond the words, beyond the apology, beyond the mistakes. "Why?" she asked simply. Clara blinked. "Why what? Why do you want to support him now? What changed?" Clara thought for a long moment. She could have given the easy answer. That Saintly proved himself, but wasn't the truth. Not the whole truth. "Because I saw his heart before I saw his talent," she said softly. "He corrected me without mocking me. He respected me even when I didn't give him the same grace. And that says more about who he is than any equation ever could." Something in the woman's expression shifted. A subtle thaw, a quiet recognition. Saintly beamed. "Told you she was trying, Ma." "Hush, boy," the woman murmured, though her lips curved slightly at the edges. Clara continued, choosing her words carefully. "I don't just want to teach him math. I want to help him grow. And I want to grow as a teacher, too." He opened my eyes to the ways I need to improve, and I won't ignore that. The woman took another step closer. Not threatening, grounding. Her presence was strong, steady, and commanding in a way that made the space feel fuller. "Growth is good," she said, "but growth comes with responsibility. You can't teach a child like Saintly with half your heart. He'll feel it. You have to be all in." "I'm all in," Clara replied, without hesitation. Saintly nodded enthusiastically. "She means it." His mother exhaled slowly, and the tension that had woven itself through the room began to loosen. She pulled out a chair across from Clara and sat, folding her hands neatly in her lap. "Maybe," she said quietly, "we can learn from each other." Clara felt something warm unfurl in her chest. Not romantic, not yet, but a deep, grounding respect. A connection forming through truth, through honesty, through the shared desire to protect and guide a remarkable boy. "I'd like that," Clara said. Saintly hopped off his chair, excitement lighting his face. "Does that mean she can come back again?" His mother gave him a look of playful skepticism. "We'll see." But even Clara could hear the softness behind the words. They moved into the living room, Saintly showing Clara some of his drawings, a few puzzles he'd completed, and a stack of books he was reading. His enthusiasm was infectious, and Clara found herself laughing more than she expected, easing into the space as though she had been there before. After a while, Saintly yawned, stretching his arms overhead. "Looks like somebody's bedtime is calling," his mother said with a knowing glance. Saintly pouted, but didn't argue. Clara rose slowly. "I should get going. Thank you. For tonight. For the meal. For the conversation." Saintly's mother walked her to the door. The hallway light cast a soft glow across her features, making her seem even more grounded, even more anchored in her truth. "Tomorrow's lesson will look different," she said. Clara nodded. "I'm ready." The woman held her eyes for a beat, a silent confirmation, a quiet understanding. "Drive safe," she said finally. Clara stepped into the breezy night air, closing the door gently behind her. As she walked toward her car, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. A pull toward something new, something meaningful, something she wanted to understand deeper. The visit had opened a door, not just into Saintly's world, but into a connection she never expected to feel. And she wasn't ready for how much it would change her. The next morning, Clara walked into her classroom with a different kind of energy, steadier, more intentional, less focused on proving herself, and more focused on connecting. For the first time in months, she wasn't rehearsing defensive responses in her head or bracing herself for subtle comments from colleagues. Instead, she carried the warmth of Saintly's home with her, the honesty in the kitchen, the steadiness of his mother's voice, the clarity she had gained from seeing the world that shaped him. She placed her bag on the desk and took a slow breath, letting her eyes travel across the empty chairs. The room felt different now, like she finally understood her role rather than trying desperately to perform it. She didn't need to dominate the classroom. She needed to guide it. Students began filing in. Some offered casual greetings. Others went straight to their seats. A few whispered quietly about Saintly's impressive correction from the day before. But Clara didn't feel the sting she expected. Instead, she felt something closer to pride. Pride in him, pride in the growth she was allowing herself. Saintly arrived last, walking with the same composed confidence she had grown familiar with. He gave her a polite nod before settling into his usual seat in the second row. Clara returned the nod. Something unspoken passed between them. Mutual respect. Something cleaner than yesterday's tension. Something rooted in the truth they had both acknowledged. "Good morning, everyone," Clara said, projecting her voice with ease. The class quieted. Today, she continued, we're going to do things a little differently. A few eyebrows rose. Clara smiled internally. Good. She wanted their curiosity. Curiosity meant engagement. Instead of beginning with a lecture, she opened with a discussion question. Something reflective, something that encouraged participation rather than intimidation. Hands raised. Students shared their thoughts. Clara listened, really listened. She didn't rush their answers or correct them too quickly. She gave space, encouraged exploration, and guided conversations toward deeper understanding. For the first time in a long time, the classroom didn't feel like a battlefield or a pedestal. It felt like a community, and saintly, he became a quiet partner in learning. He didn't dominate the room. He didn't outshine anyone. Instead, he spoke at the right moments, adding clarity when classmates were confused, offering gentle explanations that made others nod in understanding. He balanced brilliance with empathy, something Clara admired deeply. At one point, a student struggled with a concept on the board. Before Clara could step in, Saintly raised his hand softly. "Can I explain it?" he asked. She nodded. "Go ahead." He walked to the front and broke the concept down step by step, translating it into language that felt natural and accessible. His classmates didn't just understand. They leaned in, fascinated by how someone so young could communicate so effectively. Clara watched him closely, this time not with fear or insecurity, but with appreciation. She realized she wasn't being overshadowed. She was witnessing brilliance and learning from it, and it felt good. Later that afternoon, Clara received an email from the department chair. A simple message: "Noticed improvement in your classroom engagement metrics. Keep up the good work." No criticism, no undermining tone, no backhanded compliments, just acknowledgement. Clara sat back in her chair, feeling a soft wave wash over her. Not pride exactly, but validation that her shift wasn't imagined. She really was changing, and people were noticing. But what surprised her most wasn't the department's approval. It was what, or rather who, her mind drifted to when she thought about growth. Saintly's mother, her steady presence, her direct truth, her layered strength. Clara found herself replaying bits of their conversation from the night before. The honesty, the tension, the unexpected softness beneath the mother's guarded exterior. She remembered the quiet look they shared at the door, the grounded kindness behind her words. Clara hadn't gone to the apartment expecting to feel connected. She had gone to take responsibility. But now she found herself thinking about the woman more than she wanted to admit. Her clarity, her warmth beneath discipline, her voice. Clara shook her head lightly, trying to refocus on her desk, her work, her notes. But the memory lingered anyway, steady and warm, like a light that refused to fade. Clara hadn't planned on returning to Saintly's apartment so soon, but plans weren't always the ones that guided a person. Sometimes it was something deeper, something instinctive. After class the next day, she found herself lingering by her car, weighing her choices. She could drive home, decompress, and prepare for tomorrow's lecture, or she could follow the tug in her chest that whispered she had more to learn. Before she could overthink it, she sent a brief message to Saintly's mother. "If today is not a good day, I completely understand. But if you're open to it, I would appreciate visiting again." She expected to wait a while, but the reply came quickly. "Come by." 2 simple words, yet they carried a depth Clara couldn't ignore. By the time she arrived at the apartment complex, the evening light hung low, casting a soft glow across the courtyard. Children were still outside, not jumping rope this time, but chasing each other across the pavement, their laughter cutting through the fading sounds of the day. It softened Clara's nerves more effectively than any deep breath could. She walked up the steps and knocked lightly. Saintly opened the door again, but this time with a calmer excitement, as though her visit was something expected, something natural. "You made it," he said with a grin. Clara smiled. "I did." "Ma's in the living room," he said, stepping aside. "She said to bring you straight in." Clara entered, closing the door behind her. The apartment felt just as warm as before, but tonight there was a quieter atmosphere, more intimate, less busy, like the home had exhaled into a slower rhythm. Saintly's mother was seated on the couch, a book resting on her lap. She looked up as Clara entered, her eyes steady and unreadable, but not closed off. "Good evening," the woman said. "Good evening," Clara replied, taking a few steps closer. "Rough day?" the woman asked, observing Clara's posture. Clara let out a soft breath. "Not rough, just full. I realized there's still so much I don't understand, and I didn't want to wait too long before learning more." A faint lift touched the corner of the woman's mouth. Not a smile, but something close. "Have a seat," Clara did, choosing the armchair across from her. Saintly climbed onto the carpet with a notebook, doodling shapes quietly, as though giving the adult space. For a moment, silence filled the room. Tense, reflective. Saintly's mother rested the book beside her. "You said you wanted to understand him better. So tell me, what do you think you learned yesterday?" Clara didn't rush her answer. "That genius isn't something you teach. It's something you nurture. And that Saintly's confidence isn't arrogance. It's the product of love, expectation, and truth." The woman nodded once. "Good. But there's more." Clara leaned forward slightly. "I want to hear it." The woman studied her for several seconds, eyes patient and searching. "Saintly's father isn't around. Hasn't been since he was a baby. So I've raised him with the help of my family and my community. Everything he knows about standing tall, he learned from watching the people around him carry their own weight." Clara listened closely, absorbing the depth beneath each word. "He's brilliant," the woman continued, "but brilliance doesn't shield a child from the world. it can make things harder. People expect more. They misunderstand his confidence. They think he's showing off when he's just being himself. Clara's chest tightened with empathy. I see that now. And I want to protect his light, not dim it. St. Lee lifted his head at that, his eyes softening. His mother's voice lowered. That's why I'm careful about who gets close to him, who teaches him, who influences how he sees himself. Clara nodded. I understand. And I respect that you're cautious. Good, the woman said softly. Because my son is not just gifted. He's sensitive. He feels energy. He reads people. He senses when someone's not being real. Clara swallowed, feeling the truth of that settle deeply inside her. Then, unexpectedly, the woman's expression shifted, just a fraction, but enough to change the air between them. Her gaze softened in a way Clara hadn't seen before. You know, she said, you surprised me. Most people in your position would have defended themselves yesterday, or hid behind their title. But you didn't. Clara's pulse fluttered. You took responsibility, the woman continued. And that means something. Clara wasn't sure why the words affected her the way they did. Maybe because they were genuine. Maybe because they came from a woman whose respect wasn't easy to earn. Or maybe because she felt something stirring between them. Something quiet, but undeniably present. Their eyes held for a moment, longer than expected. Not inappropriate, not intense, just aware. Saintly broke the moment by holding up his notebook. Look, Ma, I drew a new pattern. His mother smiled softly and leaned down to examine it. Clara watched her, feeling something warm settle in her chest. This just a boy she was learning to understand. This was a family she was slowly being invited into, cautiously, carefully, but genuinely. And for the first time, Clara felt vulnerable in a new way, not because she feared rejection, but because she cared. Deeply, more than she realized. 2 days later, Clara walked into the university with more confidence than she had felt in months. Her classroom had become a smoother, more welcoming space, and students responded enthusiastically to the shift. Even faculty members had begun noticing small changes, nods in the hallway, brief acknowledgments that weren't there before. But growth didn't guarantee ease, and today would test every new layer she had built. The tension began halfway through her lecture. A senior faculty member, Professor Harding, stepped into the room unannounced. Harding rarely visited anyone's class, unless he intended to evaluate them, and seldom kindly. He leaned against the wall with his clipboard, observing like a man waiting for something to go wrong. Clara kept teaching, though her pulse quickened. She continued breaking down the lesson, engaging students, inviting their questions. The class responded well, but Harding's blank stare remained fixed on her, picking apart her every movement. When she assigned a group problem, Saintly worked quietly with 2 classmates, guiding them gently through the steps. Clara watched him for a moment, grateful for his calm presence. But Harding's eyes narrowed at the sight. A few minutes before dismissal, Harding spoke loudly enough for the entire class to hear. "You're allowing a child to lead your instruction now?" The room froze. Clara's breath caught. Saintly looked up slowly, confusion flickering across his face. Clara stepped forward. He wasn't leading the instruction. He was helping classmates understand the process. Harding scoffed. "Helping? A 9-year-old? This is a university course, not a playground." A few students bristled. One muttered under his breath. Saintly's shoulders drew in, not out of guilt, but out of the familiar sting of being underestimated. Clara felt something in her chest tighten sharply. "With all due respect," she said, voice steady, "Saintly is enrolled because he met the academic requirements to be here." Harding folded his arms. "Requirements aren't the issue. Optics are. This looks unprofessional, Clara. You're losing control of your classroom." The words sliced deeper than he knew. Clara had spent months fighting that exact narrative. Young, inexperienced, incapable. And now, with the progress she had finally made, Harding reduced her entire class to optics. She opened her mouth to respond, but a voice at the doorway cut across the room. "Funny. From the hall, it looked like you were the distraction." Every head turned. Saintly's mother stood at the door. Clara's eyes widened. She hadn't expected her, hadn't even known she was on campus. But there she was, calm but unmistakably firm, her presence filling the room instantly. Harding blinked. "And you are a mother," she said plainly. "One who doesn't like hearing adults speak down to children or the people teaching them." The class murmured quietly. Saintly stared at his mother with wide, relieved eyes. Harding straightened. "This is a university facility. Parents have no authority here." "Authority?" she repeated. But voice?" "Yes." She stepped into the room slowly, her gaze never leaving him. "You walked in here ready to tear down a teacher who has worked harder than you realize. And you tried to humiliate a child who has done nothing but excel." Harding stiffened. "I was evaluating—" "No?" She cut in gently but firmly. "You were imposing. There's a difference." The room fell silent again. Saintly's mother looked briefly at Clara, her eyes softening for just a moment. Reassurance, solidarity, something grounding. Clara felt her breath return. Then the mother turned back to Harding. "Let me explain something clearly. My son is not a threat to your standards. He exceeds them. And Clara isn't losing control. She's finally gaining it. Because she's teaching with heart, not fear." A few students nodded quietly. Harding's jaw tightened. "This is inappropriate." "What's inappropriate," she replied, "is an adult coming into a classroom and belittling people publicly instead of offering support." Harding faltered, actually faltered for the first time. Saintly stood slowly and walked to his mother's side. She rested a hand on his shoulder. protective but calm. Clara stepped forward. This time, her voice did not shake. "She's right." Harding looked at her, startled. "I've improved because I stopped teaching defensively. Saintly has helped this class grow, not regress, and I will not allow anyone to speak about him or my teaching disrespectfully." For a split second, Harding seemed at a loss. Then he muttered something under his breath, turned sharply, and exited the room without another word. The door closed. Silence. Then a wave of soft applause rose from the students, hesitant at first, then stronger. Saintly grinned shyly. Clara flushed with surprise. But it was the mother's eyes Clara felt most. Warmth, pride, and something deeper. Trust. Later, as the room emptied, she lingered by the door. "You handled yourself well," she said quietly. Clara breathed out. "You didn't have to defend me." "I know," the woman replied. "But sometimes people need someone to stand beside them." Today was one of those days. Their eyes held for a moment warmer than anything before, layered with gratitude, connection, and something Clara didn't dare name yet. But she felt it. How did the woman? Saintly tugged his mother's sleeve. "Ma, can we walk her out?" She glanced at Clara. "Yeah," she said softly. "We can." Together, they stepped into the hallway, a trio that no longer felt accidental, a trio that felt like a beginning. Family, if you're still with me, drop a love in the comments and share this story with someone who needs it. Your support helps this channel grow. Clara didn't realize how much the moment in her classroom had changed things until she found herself walking beside Saintly's mother in the quiet corridor outside. The energy that once existed between them, cautious, measured, guarded, had shifted into something gentler, still strong, still grounded, but open in a way Clara had never seen before. They stepped outside into the cool Colorado afternoon. Students scattered across the campus lawn, their laughter floating through the breeze. Clara stopped just beyond the doorway, unsure if she should speak first. The mother stood beside her, arms relaxed now, no tension in her shoulders. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then the mother exhaled deeply, as though letting go of a weight she had been carrying alone for years. "You handled yourself today," she said quietly. Clara looked at her, surprised by the softness in her tone. "I didn't want to let him down." "Or you?" "You didn't," the woman replied. "That matters more than you know." They walked slowly toward the parking lot, their steps falling into an unintentional rhythm. Clara felt the silence between them shift, no longer heavy, but thoughtful. The mother spoke again, her voice lower than before. "Raising a gifted black boy in this country, it's beautiful, but it's also terrifying." Clara listened with complete attention. "You teach him to shine," the mother said, "but you also teach him the world won't always know what to do with his light. Some people will celebrate him, Others will feel threatened by him. And you never know which ones he'll meet in places where he's supposed to be safe. Clara's chest tightened like a classroom. Exactly. The woman stopped walking. School should be the one place where he doesn't have to shrink or dim himself. But that's not always how it goes. Clara felt the weight of that truth settle over her. I can't imagine how much pressure that puts on you. The mother's eyes softened, not with pity, but with vulnerability. Pressure doesn't scare me. What scares me is when people underestimate him before they even know his name, or treat him like a problem when he's the solution to his own future. Clara nodded slowly. And yesterday, with the equation, you thought I was one of those people. The woman didn't deny it. I did, because I've seen that story before. Too many times. Now? Clara asked gently. The woman met her eyes directly. The longest, deepest eye contact they had shared yet. Now, I see someone trying to be better, someone who cares, and someone who can grow into the kind of teacher he deserves. Clara felt her breath hitch, unexpected emotion rising in her throat. The mother didn't look away. The atmosphere between them shifted. Not romantic, not rushed, but deeply human. A connection born out of honesty, struggle, and mutual respect. Saintly came skipping toward them from behind, unaware he had interrupted anything. Ma, Clara, look what I drew. The mother smiled, the seriousness in her expression melting into warmth. Show us, baby. Saintly held up a small scrap of paper with lines and shapes, forming an intricate pattern. It's a new one, he announced proudly. Clara crouched beside him. That's incredible, Saintly. You keep surprising me. He beamed. Ma says surprises are good for the mind. Clara glanced at the woman, their eyes meeting with a flicker of shared laughter. Saintly ran ahead toward the car, giving them a few more seconds alone. The woman turned to Clara one more time. Want you to know something. Clara inhaled, waiting. I don't let many people close. Not to me. And definitely not to him. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But you've shown me more in the last few days than some people show in years. Clara swallowed hard. Thank you for trusting me. I'm learning to, the woman said softly. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't an ending. It was an opening. A door gently pushed ajar. And as Clara watched Saintly wave from the car, she realized that this wasn't just the closing chapter of a conflict. It was the beginning of something healing, something rare, something she was grateful to be invited into. The next morning, Clara walked into her classroom feeling a combination of anticipation and quiet resolve. Yesterday's confrontation with Harding had shaken her, but not in the way conflict used to. Instead of spiraling into self-doubt, she felt steadier, grounded by the realization that she wasn't standing alone anymore. For the first time, she felt supported not just by her students, but by Saintly and his mother. As the students trickled in, The room buzzed with a soft undercurrent of excitement. Word about the confrontation had spread faster than Clara expected. Saintly sat at his desk, flipping through his notebook, unaware of the awe surrounding him. Clara placed her notes on the podium, but today she didn't want to begin with a lecture. She wanted to begin with truth. "Before we get started," she said, her voice warm but serious, "I owe this class something." The room stilled. Even Saintly looked up. Clara took a deep breath. "A few days ago, I made a mistake. I wrote something on the board that wasn't solvable, not because it was a good teaching tool, but because I was insecure. And someone in this room saw through it with clarity and grace." Murmurs rippled across the class. Clara turned toward Saintly. "This young man," she said, "did something most adults struggle with. He saw a problem clearly, explained it respectfully, and corrected it with intelligence far beyond his years." A soft wave of pride lit Saintly's face, but he didn't speak. He simply listened, the same way he always did when the moment carried weight. Clara continued, "I want to acknowledge publicly what I didn't acknowledge then, Saintly. You're not just gifted, you are a true scholar. And your brilliance doesn't diminish this class. It elevates it." A few students clapped softly, then more joined in until the room filled with applause. It wasn't loud, but it was sincere. Saintly lowered his eyes, embarrassed but glowing. Clara felt her throat tighten. This wasn't just about correcting a mistake. It was about honoring a child who deserved to be seen fully, not just for what he could do, but for who he was. When the applause settled, she added, "And I've grown because of you. Thank you for teaching your teacher." The class smiled. Saintly looked stunned, not because he doubted her sincerity, but because being acknowledged openly by an adult meant more than he knew how to express. Clara moved into the day's lesson, but something felt different. Every student paid closer attention. Every question flowed more naturally, and Saintly participated with ease, his confidence grounded, his voice steady. Halfway through the lecture, Clara noticed movement at the door. Saintly's mother stood there, not intruding, not interrupting, just watching. Clara's breath caught, not out of panic this time, but because she felt something warm rise in her chest. Saintly saw her and waved. She lifted her hand in return. Then her eyes shifted to Clara, holding her gaze with an expression Clara had never seen from her before. Pride, not only in her son, but in Clara. The moment stretched between them, soft but full. Clara continued teaching, more inspired than she expected. When she solved an example equation on the board, she glanced back instinctively, and the mother nodded subtly, as if to say, "You're doing well." It shouldn't have mattered so much, but it did. It mattered deeply. When class ended, students packed up quickly, buzzing with conversation. Saintly hugged his backpack to his chest and hurried toward his mother. Clara approached them slowly, unsure if she should speak first. The mother broke the silence. "I heard your acknowledgment." Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks. It was overdue. "It was honest," the woman replied. "That's what mattered." Saintly beamed between them. "Ma," she said, "I'm a scholar." "You are?" she said, cupping the back of his head affectionately. "And don't you forget it." Then her attention shifted back to Clara. A quiet exchange, a moment that carried more meaning than words. "You didn't have to say any of that publicly," she told Clara. "I did," Clara responded gently, "because he deserved to hear it. And he deserved for others to hear it, too." The mother studied her for a long moment, eyes soft, tone low. "You're growing, not just as a teacher, but as a person." Clara felt her pulse quicken, not with fear, but with something warm, something she didn't want to name yet. The mother stepped slightly closer, lowering her voice. "You've earned more of my trust than you realize." Their eyes held the longest yet. Saintly tugged his mother's sleeve. "Can Clara walk with us?" The mother didn't look away from Clara. "If she wants to, I do," Clara whispered. And as they walked out together, saintly skipping ahead, the two women side by side, something unspoken but undeniable settled between them. Affection, respect, possibility, all born from one wrong equation. The weekend arrived with a kind of quiet that invited reflection. Clara found herself replaying the events of the past week. The wrong equation, Saintly's gentle correction, the mother's guarded strength, Harding's confrontation, and yesterday's public acknowledgment that had sealed something new between all three of them. For the first time in years, Clara didn't dread Monday. She looked forward to it. But today wasn't a classroom day. Today, she had been invited, truly invited, back to Saintly's home. She parked in the familiar lot and felt a different kind of flutter in her chest. Not nerves, not fear, something warmer, something that felt like stepping toward a space she was becoming a part of. Saintly opened the door before she knocked, as though he had been waiting. "Clara, you're here?" His excitement warmed her instantly. "Of course. I said I'd come." He grabbed her hand without hesitation and pulled her inside. The home felt just as welcoming as before. Comforting colors, familiar scents, the gentle hum of music that always seemed to float through the air. But something felt different, too. Clara felt different walking through it, less like a guest, more like someone allowed to belong. Saintly's mother stepped out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She wasn't dressed up, just relaxed, comfortable, but that simplicity made her presence feel even stronger. "You made it," she said. The softness in her voice caught Clara off guard. "I wouldn't miss it." Saintly ran ahead to his small table where papers and notebooks were scattered. "Clara, look, I made new equations." Clara followed him, kneeling beside the table. What she saw stunned her. Saintly had built his own mathematical sequences, patterns layered within patterns, elegant and surprising, not random scribbles, but structured thought. "These are incredible," Clara whispered. "You built all of this?" He nodded proudly. "They came to me last night. Ma said I should show you." Clara smiled, touched. "I'm honored." The mother leaned on the doorframe, watching them, not with caution, not with reserve, but with quiet pride. Clara looked back at her. Their eyes met. The mother's expression held something unspoken, something she didn't hide this time. Clara stood, brushing her hands on her knees. "He's extraordinary." "I know," the mother replied softly, "but it means a lot hearing you say it." Clara stepped a little closer, drawn not by obligation, but by a quiet pull she didn't resist. "You've done an amazing job with him." The mother inhaled slowly, her eyes softening. "Thank you. It wasn't always easy." Clara sensed depths behind her tone. Years of sacrifice, private battles, decisions made alone. "You're raising him with so much love," Clara said. "Anyone can see that." The mother lowered her gaze briefly. The vulnerability in that moment, more intimate than anything they had shared before. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough." "You're doing more than enough," Clara said gently. Silence settled. Warm, meaningful, unforced. Out on the small porch, the afternoon sun spilled across the pavement. The mother nodded toward it. "Come sit with me for a minute?" Clara nodded. "I'd like that." They stepped outside, leaving Saintly deeply absorbed in his equations. The air was cool, the breeze soft against their skin. They sat side by side on the small porch bench, close but not crowded. For a long moment, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. The mother finally broke the quiet. "You've changed these past few days." "So have you," Clara replied. A small smile curved the woman's lips. "Maybe we both needed the same thing." "What's that?" Clara asked softly. "Someone willing to meet us with honesty instead of assumptions." Clara's heart tightened in the best way. "I'm glad it was you." Their eyes held, steady, warm, unmistakably connected, not romantic, not rushed, just real. The mother exhaled deeply. "I didn't expect to trust you this quickly. I didn't expect to earn it," Clara admitted. "But I'm grateful I did." They sat quietly again, letting the truth settle. Inside, Saintly hummed to himself, the sound drifting through the open door. It wrapped around the porch like a ribbon, tying the moment together. "This week started with a mistake," Clara said softly. "A big one. But it taught me more about humility, community, and courage than any academic training ever did." The mother nodded. "And it taught me that not everyone outside our world is here to hurt us. Some are here to grow with us. Clara looked at her, warmth filling her chest. I want to be one of those people. You are, the woman said gently. The breeze swept across the porch, carrying distant sounds of life. Children laughing, a car door closing, someone calling to a neighbor. It was ordinary, and yet the moment felt anything but ordinary. Saintly burst through the door with a new paper in hand. Clara, I made another one. Clara laughed. Let me see. The mother watched them, teacher and child, trust and growth, and she felt something settle inside her too. The three of them had begun something unexpected, something healing, something hopeful. One wrong equation had exposed insecurity. One child's brilliance had bridged a gap. And one connection, steady, tender, and growing, had begun to change all their lives. Family, if this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps this channel reach more hearts and bring more powerful stories your way.